Hello, my name is Andre Ward. I'm the Associate Vice President of the David Rothenberg Center for Public Policy at the Fortune Society. Welcome to Both Sides of the Bars, a discussion-driven show that examines the legal system from various perspectives, including people most impacted by the criminal legal system. We discuss critical questions about how the current system works, its intersections with social justice, and we highlight the efforts that are being made to improve the lives of everyone affected. We ask you, the viewers, to spread the word about both sides of the bars and share your comments with us on Twitter at the FOC TURNESOC. Today's show is entitled Tapping into an Untapped Labor Market: The Importance of Hiring People Previously Involved in the Justice System. The United States has a near record number of job openings, and companies complain they can't find enough help. One solution for employers: open your doors to people with criminal backgrounds who have historically found themselves unemployed and unable to earn a living wage. It would be a win-win situation, according to this episode's guest, Jeffrey Abramowitz, the Executive Director of Justice Partnerships at Philadelphia-based JEVS Human Services. Jeff is the creator of the Untapped Talent Professional Development course, which provides human resource specialists, employers, and those working with justice-involved individuals with best practices in hiring and retaining talent. And just to give us some background on Jeffrey, and we're really thankful that he has joined us. He's the executive director of Partnership Justice, or rather Justice Partnerships, and previously served as the executive director of Reentry Services for JEVS Human Services and the program director of Looking Forward Philadelphia Reentry Program. Jeff is a 2018 fellow for Just Leadership USA and served as a director of Student Services and Workforce Development for Community Learning Center, an adult literacy agency in Philadelphia. And so he has an extensive background. I mean, obviously, I would be here probably all day reading all the accomplishments of Jeff, but we're certainly grateful that he's joined us. And, he's a keynote speaker, he's a writer, he's a lecturer around the country on issues of adult education, workforce development, and criminal and social justice. He regularly speaks out on such topics as incarceration, reentry, prison education, criminal justice reform, workforce development, career development and exploration, career and technical education, and criminal justice law. Jeffrey Abramowitz, thank you so much for joining us here on Both Sides of the Bars. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. Thanks so much. I'm really excited about being here, and I'm looking forward to this discussion. I've actually been thinking a lot about the topic today and how relevant it is in everything that's happening in our world. So I'm looking forward to just diving in and sharing as much information as I can with you.
Absolutely. And so speaking of diving in, let's dive right into it. And so, Jeffrey, you obviously are really focused on making sure people who have criminal legal histories are accessing employment opportunities so they can earn a livable wage. And let's talk about your background. How was it that, you got involved with working with justice-involved individuals?
So, wow. I don't even know where to begin, but let's start at the beginning. I guess I was a lawyer for a long time, 20 years, a trial lawyer, and made some bad choices in life that landed me into a federal prison. I spent 5 years incarcerated, and 7 years ago, I came home to Philadelphia, homeless, living in a shelter for about a year, and started teaching GED math. And that got me going. As soon as I started teaching, I knew what my passion was going to be. I knew that I needed to do something to help men and women that were coming home, and quickly navigated that next step for me, which was becoming a director of workforce development at an adult literacy agency in Philadelphia. And quite frankly, things in my life have really turned to a place where I find myself in the center of workforce development, criminal justice, and adult literacy. And the importance of that drives me every day to wake up out of bed. But quite frankly, I wear very new glasses today. The glasses I wear today are not only of an administrator, of an educator, a teacher, but also of a returning citizen, somebody that struggled, that understands what it's like not to have transportation or identification when you come home from prison. of understanding what it's like to have to justify on a resume your value and what you're worth, and how difficult it is to not only navigate getting back to work, but also all those other challenges that surround you, like getting a bank account and getting housing. So the glasses that I wear today have enabled me to share the journey of the men and women that I've lived with and work with every day that are justice involved and that struggle with some of these challenges. So I'm interested in really trying to engage in a discussion about workforce and where we are today, because it's really changed. And if you had told me 10 years ago that employers would be reaching out to me saying, Jeff, we want to hire more returning citizens, what do we need to do? I would say, Andre, you're crazy. But the truth is, companies now are opening that door wider and wider, and it's for us to take advantage of it.
So speaking of that, right, and that context is really helpful, Jeff, and certainly as someone who has a shared experience and history with those impacted by the criminal legal system, right, you're speaking from experience, not just textbook. And so, let's discuss your efforts, right, to tap into the untapped labor market of justice involved citizens, and also you're working hard with employers across the country to get them to open up doors, et cetera. We know you're doing some work there with people. Like, how do you get employers to open their doors, right, Jeff? I mean, the stigma associated with having a conviction history, the bias that's into that, and although we know fair chance for housing, the Fair Chance Act has passed, we know that some employers still practice discriminatory ways of engaging things, and that's unfortunate. And so, talk to us about how do you get employers to open their doors in hiring people with criminal backgrounds?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and quite frankly, it's not rocket science. We are in a world right now where there are more jobs out there than there are people to fill them, and it just makes financial sense. As we talk to employers about engaging this population of men and women that are justice involved, we need to be mindful that 70 to 100 million people in our country have something on their criminal background, and those people also have talent. They have skill set, and there's often been a door that's been closed for them. So talking to employers is getting them to understand something that it's just about the humanity, bringing back, allowing people to tell their stories, not just precluding somebody from a job or a career opportunity because of something they did sometimes a year, 10, 15, 20 years ago that may be on their record. So we're finding now that employers are beginning to open that door. They're willing to listen, and they're willing to find, and they're looking for that talent. Are the people going to bring value to their company? Do they have a skill set that can help their company be profitable? Are they going to be on time? Are they going to work hard? When you drill down to those things where men and women that are justice involved often have, in the justice setting, everyone inside of prisons has a job. They wake up at a certain time. They're very regiment. There's a routine that they have. And they're also hardworking. But men and women coming home, they have this passion. They want to succeed. They just don't have the direction, and they don't have the opportunity that's been available to so many other people. So talking to employers is really about sharing the opportunity that exists for them as well. Things like educating employers to that there may be a tax credit, the federal tax credit that they maybe have access to. Understanding that when you hire a returning citizen, it's not just about hiring the individual, but it's also helping them navigate all those other challenges around them. I get frustrated because quite often a lot of people say it's all about getting a job. Yo, Mr. A, I'll take a job. I'll take anything about a job. It's not about a job. It's about a career. And that's the mindset we have to have. It's got to be about helping people find that thing that they're passionate about, that they love to do, because those are the jobs that stick. Those are the jobs that people retain and they stay with, and they become career pathways for them where there's advancement opportunities. So it's educating employers about all of those opportunities, and also educating candidates, men and women that are coming home, that, they need to be transparent. They need to be open. They need to know how to tell their story, and they need to know their value. Look, I was away with some guys that were remarkable. I was with a gentleman who could flip a quarter into a backhoe, one of those 5-ton buckets, and just I want him digging, if I'm a construction company, I want him digging those holes next to gas pipelines, right? Because of his skill set. So those are the kind of opportunities that are the doors that are opening wider. And we just have to engage. We have to embrace them.
Absolutely. And they say that employers are hire folk, with criminal legal histories for a couple of reasons. And one, they can help the company make more money. That's what some employers note. And the other thing is they can help save the company money. So, when it comes to hiring men and women, like Jeff, as we think about that, what value do they potentially bring to the table? And I think you've kind of like referenced some of that, right? And being incarcerated and being around people that have so much skills, right, has to be parlayed into an employment environment that can make the most use of those skills while obviously paying them livable wages and valuing them as a human being. Talk a little bit more about that, Jeff.
Yeah, so there's so many pieces of that. First of all, there's a piece of just the value of someone going to work. Oftentimes, men and women that are incarcerated have done their careers, sometimes for years or even decades, where they've been involved in an employment and have a skill set that they can use. Even men and women that, I've worked with some gentlemen that have been out on the streets and all they've dealt is sold drugs, but you know what? They're fantastic salesmen. And just really understanding what skill set they bring to the table. And then giving them the direction to know it's not just that entry level position that's important. It's how do you advance? It's how do you take that entry level position and move up into a company? And employers are now starting to engage because, quite frankly, there was a great story recently on the news that talked about, the great resignation that's going on around the country. And people are resigning and they're walking away from jobs. And those job opportunities now are becoming ripe for men and women that door have been closed on, and employers are accepting it now. But there's also an accountability that comes with that. When employers want to open the door and they want to open that door wider for people with backgrounds, they also need to understand that there are still challenges there. There are in our country well over 1,400 occupational licensing restrictions for men and women that are justice involved. And that needs to change. Just because someone had done something in their past doesn't mean they're not super qualified and they don't deserve and warrant a licensing credential. So the fact here in Pennsylvania, up until recently, if you were a barber in Pennsylvania, you couldn't get your license renewed because you had a felon. Now, we changed that law about 2 years ago, and that's what needs to happen across our country. We need to look at occupational licensing restrictions, and we need to say, you know what? That doesn't make somebody disqualified or unqualified to do the job. There are also a lot of sensitivity things. The Society for Human Resources, SHRM, has a great platform called Getting Talent Back to Work. And they have this course. It's a 10-module course. It's totally free, and it's targeting people that are HR, human resource specialists, to tell them what do they need to know about hiring men and women that are justice involved. And if you're out there and you're listening to this, just get on and do it. It took me a few hours. I got on and got the certification. Really simple, and it's free, totally free. But it really educates you to some of the challenges that men and women face as they come back into the workforce and how we can engage them. How those questions that we should be asking them when they get the job, and how we can help them navigate moving forward in those positions. I think that there are a lot of opportunities when it comes to the placement of the job, but it's the advancement and the retention that does away with poverty, and that's how really change happens.
Right, and so thinking about that, Jeff, what should employers know about people? This is a dual question. What do employers need to know about hiring folk with justice histories? And how do we change the narrative around hiring people, right, who have been incarcerated and have been justice involved, right, in terms of legislation, education, and training?
So employers need to know right up front that hiring someone that's justice involved has other things attached to it. Like just hiring somebody, we can't take things for granted anymore. I'll give you an example. Men and women that come home from prison often don't have identification. they don't have a driver's license, or they don't have a social security card, or they don't have a bank account where their checks can be direct deposited. So we can't assume anything. We have to ask those questions. Do you need a social security card? No one in this country can be employed unless they have those two pieces of identification, social security card, identification, and a place to put the money, a place to deposit it. And so we need to educate employers. They need to understand that just because they have a job doesn't mean that they have a way to get to the job, right? It doesn't mean that they know how to navigate a computer or even check in or put their time cards in a computer. It's one of the things we'll hopefully talk about today is that digital literacy for men and women is a big impediment for people coming home because they often don't have the training to know exactly how to navigate a mouse, how to download a resume, how to get on and log on to things and use a computer efficiently. So employers can't take any of that for granted. They need to be able to walk through with a person and understand that it may be giving them transportation for a week or helping them get to work or even boots and clothing. Just because you get the job doesn't mean that your housing needs go away or food insecurity or clothing needs. All those still remain in play. And a good employer is really going to understand that and be aware, not that they have to meet those needs, but maybe have some direction on where people can go to get resources and supports.
And you spoke of digital literacy, Jeff. And as we talk about that, why should we be spending money on like adult literacy for men and women in the justice system and who have already returned, especially Jeff, right? Where there are so many other things that need to be invested in.
Look, we have 600,000 plus people come back from our prisons and jails every year. 600,000 of them. And of those people that come back and that return, 2/3 are going to find their way back behind the walls or in touch by the justice system within 3 to 5 years. If we don't prepare people better for what happens when they walk outside of that prison, what do we think is going to happen? It just isn't rocket science here. We need to do a better job preparing men and women for what happens the second they walk out that door. And the way I describe it is right outside of every prison facility is this fast flowing water. And that water often drives people back to the neighborhoods and some of the challenges that they faced before. Our job is to help them get over that water so that they can be successful, so they can have that job. And education and skill development, no question, holds the key to that. We have to be in a better position to help people. The unemployment rate for men and women coming home today from incarceration is 27%.
Right.
That's higher than the peak of the Great Depression.
Sure.
And we have to be mindful of all that, and we have to prepare people for that next step. And that's giving them skills. That's giving them academic support, helping them read, helping them write, helping them know math, basic math that can get them through those challenges. Look, when I was in prison, I taught a CDL class. I had never driven a truck before. I don't even think I've been in a cab of a truck at that point in time. And the one challenge I found was that men and women, they couldn't read or know enough math to pass the exam to get their CDL licensing. So we taught them how to pass the test. And that's what needs to happen. We need to educate people so that they have the skill set, they have the educational support so that they can move forward. And it's not just about the credential. The credential is one thing, and having a CDL license is one thing, but it's also moving that forward. We can't just accept the reality that giving someone a ServSafe certification helps them get a job. Right. We need to push them farther. We need to push them to go back to college, to become a chef, to get that culinary degree, to get that nutrition degree or whatever it is, because post-secondary education is so important. So why invest in it? We lose $372 billion a year in lost earnings from the men and women that are incarcerated. So we need to bring that money and drive it back into our economy. There's a great book by Jeff Korsenik that just came out called Untapped Talent.
Yeah.
Jeff is a good friend who is with Fifth Third Bank. And Jeff explains the financial and the economics behind hiring returning citizens. It just makes financial sense.
And speaking of that, like, how are we doing as a country, Jeff, when it comes to like preparing people, right, for the next steps after incarceration?
So we're doing. There was a great study by the Council for State Governments in February of 2020, and it gave four building blocks that were necessary for to help people after their release. And they included like availability of funding for programs, continuing post-secondary programming, elimination of restrictions on them, and incentives and supports. And they did this study across our country, and not a single state, not one single state, had all four building blocks that were required to help men and women. We are starting to get it. I do a project with the United States Department of Education now called IET, which is Integrated Educational Trainings. And that's where you have a carpentry instructor in the same classroom with a math instructor. And
Right.
the carpentry instructor's teaching carpentry while the math teacher's teaching fractions. And those are the kind of programs that are so meaningful and that really need to take hold because they're going to help people find those careers and give them both that skill set in a contextualized learning environment
Mhm.
because we got to face the reality. A lot of men and women, they're just not right for the class. They've had bad childhood experiences or
Yep.
bad experiences in school, and we need to change that. And contextualized learning is one of the best ways of being able to do that.
Sure. And when we think about education, right? Most people think education is having a degree conferred on them from some academic institution, but when we talk about education within the context of employment, that also translates into earning an industry recognized credential as a part of education, right? Which you spoke about a little bit earlier. But education is also valuable. And speaking of which, like the Pell Grant window is closed and is now reopening for people in prison to return to college. And fairly recently, obviously, here in New York State, there's a campaign called Turn on the Tap that looks to restore the tuition assistance program in the prisons. And Governor Kathy Hochul here in New York State is looking to advance that legislation too, so at some point it could reach its passage. But when you think about that, what do you expect to happen in 2023, Jeff, when the Pell Grant system will be open to anyone who's incarcerated?
Wow. So that's a really great question. I've been talking around the country about this because as the Pell Grant window opens, colleges are now they're now opening their doors wider. The first thing I want to say about that is that the one of the first things we need to do is we need to ban the box in education. So we need to make it so that when you apply for college or post-secondary schools across the country, that they're not asking the question, have you committed a felony? Do you have a criminal background?
Right.
Second thing we have to acknowledge is that just by taking one class inside, just one class inside of a prison, going to reduce your chance of going back to prison by 43% and give you a 13% better chance of getting a job.
Right.
So that's the hard data. So if we were to start building in and blending in post-secondary supports inside of prisons, that also means we have to give them the tools to succeed.
Mhm.
And that's going to be giving them iPads, giving them the ability to access the internet inside, giving students the ability to compete with others that are in their classrooms. I remember when I was away, they had a class that was given from a local college. And one of the students that I was helping was actually doing his assignment on one of those old typewriters and the typewriter with the wheels with the letters on them. And there
Yeah.
were letters missing. And I remember like it was such a tedious process. It would literally take him a week just to type out a 20-page paper and have to go back through it. We need to give, if we're going to open the Pell Grant window up as we're doing, then we also need to be mindful of the tools and resources that students need to be successful in going post-secondary and going back to college or getting those certification degrees. And I'm grateful. We worked hard getting the Pell Grant window open again, and it's going to be really impactful for people inside. We have a very captive audience when men and women are away. People that never thought or dreamed they could go to college are now going to have that opportunity.
And Jeffrey, in our remaining 2 minutes or so, just want to pose this last question to you. Why is digital literacy so important? And what should we be doing, both behind and beyond our prison walls, to provide digital literacy support within a minute or so?
So digital literacy is one of the most important things. We tell men and women as they come home, you need to get a job. You need to get online right away. You need to use a computer. You need to get, and if we don't prepare them for that when they're inside, then shame on us. Shame on us. Digital literacy should be mandated in every prison around the country in preparation for men and women leaving the facility. And I'm not talking necessarily about just the internet. I'm talking about Microsoft Word, downloading a document, navigating a computer. Those are all things that are really important, and even more important as they leave, giving them the digital skill set to actually access and have the ability to navigate a computer and apply for jobs and do all those things that are so required, that technology requires of us today in order to survive.
And Jeffrey, thank you so much for obviously joining us here on both sides of the bars. We never have enough time, but hopefully we'll get you back on. But how could folk get in contact with you, Jeffrey, and your organization and the work you're doing in Philadelphia?
Yeah, sure. So you can find us at www.jevs.org. And JEVS is a workforce development agency in Philadelphia. We do a lot of reentry and criminal justice work, as well as work with our Career One Stop. We operate the Career One Stop here in the city, a very diverse organization, where you can reach out to me at jeffrey-abramowitz.com. And that's www.jeffrey-abramowitz.com. And I'd be glad to help you and support the work that you're doing, and hopefully get some more people hired.
Jeffrey Abramowitz, thank you so much for joining us here at both sides of the bars. And to our guests, we really appreciate all of the guests that join both sides of the bars, and certainly Jeffrey is one of them. And we thank you, the viewers, for joining us for all of this thought-provoking discussion. In the meantime, on behalf of the Fortune Society, we thank you so much for tuning in to both sides of the bars. If you're interested in finding out more about the Fortune Society, please check us out on our website at fortunesociety.org. That is fortunesociety.org. Or you can go to Facebook and type in the Fortune Society. This is Andre Ward, and I certainly appreciate you always for joining us as we take a critically look at both sides of the bar.